Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlan, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the 2019 drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Jordan Bateman, Vice President of Communications and Marketing for the Independent Contractors and Business Association in BC. Welcome back to the show, Jordan.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
Of course, the big discussion on the news is the coronavirus. Any worry about that in the construction business?
No, we haven't heard any concerns about that. There's been a few ancillary issues. Look, construction is a dangerous business anyways. We put a lot of time and effort into training workers so they come home safely, into making sure you're doing everything as safely as possible. So, in the kind of scope of threats to a construction worker, coronavirus would be pretty low. But where it's kind of caused an interesting hiccup is we have heard some sporadic reports that, some supplies around, dust filtration masks, things like that have been a little bit harder to get a hold of as people try to repurpose them for virus protection. I think we all saw that viral video, bad pun, I guess, but from YVR where those folks were coming off the planes in water bottles with filters attached to the top, so all over their head. It does show you just how in demand those surgical masks are, and they've kind of spilled over to the industrial ones as well.
Yeah. I mean, surgical masks don't protect you from viruses because they're so small they can get through the material. People don't seal them up tight enough. And masks work great preventing the spread of spit and so on if you cough. But the reason surgeons wear a mask is to keep from infecting the patient, not the other way around. And I would think on the industrial scene, you have proper industrial masks for people who, they're not paper masks, there's something else.
Yeah, some are paper masks, some are plastic or other filtration systems. But I think people are, who are desperate or very concerned, they're just looking for whatever option they can find. Who knows if they're actually, have any kind of effectiveness. That's almost secondary to the, there's a little bit of a placebo effect, right? Like you think you're safe, so you are safe. You think you're healthy, so you are healthy. That's kind of what's going on. It's also the cultural issues. Like one thing we don't really understand here on the West Coast is how traumatic an experience SARS was for several major cities around the world, including Toronto. We kind of escaped the worst of that. But for people who, remember SARS, and then they hear about another super virus popping up, it does trigger fears, and can't blame them for, trying to go back to things that may have worked or they think helped them during the SARS epidemic.
Getting back home to BC now, there's concerns that there won't be money to extend the SkyTrain line any further than Arbutus in Vancouver and get it out to UBC. Is that a place where private industry could maybe get in? Because once a SkyTrain line is built, it starts paying its own bills the day it opens. Could private enterprise play a role here?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen in other parts of the SkyTrain system where private companies have stepped up and made contributions towards SkyTrain stations, for example. But look, the bottom line here is UBC has some unique control over their land. They are developing like crazy. They have a responsibility to move people back and forth as well. I did find it kind of amazing that UBC stepped forward. We want SkyTrain here, but didn't find $1 to do it, to help with it. Didn't go pass the hat to their wealthy benefactors and ask for contributions towards it. So we'll wait and see. Everyone, I think as the funding is solidified for these first phase of projects, everyone now is starting to put their mind towards the second phase. I see the mayors are headed off to Ottawa, cap in hand, to try to get more money as well. We're in the very early days of that overall funding push.
Well, the Broadway corridor is the busiest transit corridor in Canada. Barring whatever happens in Montreal or Toronto, it moves the most people, and they're all headed to UBC, which is a city on its own.
Right. I mean, they're not all headed to UBC, but a big chunk of them are. We also remember there are times where it's not the busiest. When school is out, the numbers certainly drop because there aren't so many kids commuting in. But you're right. UBC is a big city all of its own. It's not subject to, there's the university endowment land. It can kind of skirt through some of the city of Vancouver zoning bylaws and do things that you can't do elsewhere. And that's why you're sort of scratching your head going, great, president of UBC. Nice of you to point out that it'd be great to have SkyTrain go all the way there, but, you couldn't find $1 within your development budgets to go towards it. That's a little bit perplexing.
Well, hell, you could build classrooms in stations on the way there.
Well, yeah, there's lots of different things you could do. I mean, the stations aren't really the problem. It's just the distance. And, the fact that you're going through some pretty tony neighborhoods that don't want density. How do you kind of justify that? There's a similar problem taking the SkyTrain from Fleetwood all the way into Langley. Yes, Langley, deserves rapid transit, deserves that connection. But between Fleetwood and Langley, between Fleetwood and Cloverdale, you've got, a couple of miles of agricultural land reserve, where, hardly anyone lives and no one's going to be coming to stations. While you can kind of skip the station, it's so expensive to build it all that way. So these are the kind of things that, governments have to talk about. Government, the overall regional government's done a pretty terrible job of setting up proper priorities. It's still amazing to me that, there hasn't been a new SkyTrain station built in Surrey since 1990. But, we have the Millennium Line, and then you got the Evergreen Line extension and the Canada Line, running elsewhere. They certainly haven't put much focus on the south of Fraser.
And as we've discussed before on this show, if they would have just built up one more SkyTrain station a year, just a nice, quiet little sub-project on each line, we'd be out to Abbotsford by now.
No, you're exactly right. And one of the recommendations I would have to the BC Liberals as they start to build their urban-suburban platform for the next election is, look, instead of the big capital announcements every decade, because up till now we've built a SkyTrain line a decade, right? You built the Extra line in the 80s, Millennium in the 90s, Canada in the 2000s, Evergreens in the 2010s, and now we're looking at the Broadway subway and extending the Surrey line slightly. Instead of waiting for that once a decade, just squirrel some money away every single year in the budget. Say, hey, we're going to put whatever it is, $500 million towards SkyTrain extension. Maybe get you a station, a full line, all the way up to a new station every year. Maybe get you 2, depending on where you are. Go that route instead and have that kind of steady funding source. Then, the mayors and planners can make, the proper ideas, the proper strategies around how that's going to go. But instead we get these one-offs, and, it's very difficult to plan long-term with that.
Plus, I think to communities, it'd be a lot less disruption. Instead of disrupting entire districts, you're only disrupting a few blocks at a time.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And look, there are some cost savings, obviously, towards, doing more stations at once. But, through economies of scale. But you could probably still take advantage of that, right? Like, you could have a year where maybe, the overall construction is only going to be $300 million of that $500 million. And you can take the other $200 million and use it to pre-make, rails for the next little bit, or, prefab some of the stuff you need. It just takes some out-of-the-box thinking. It really takes a shift from thinking of transportation infrastructure as a one-off capital cost, and instead thinking of it as an ongoing, contribution from the operating budget.
We'll have more with Jordan Bateman right after the break.
Cypress Development Corp is developing a world-class lithium resource in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. The size of the resource makes the Clayton Valley project a premier asset with the potential to impact the future of lithium supply. Cypress Development Corp trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the OTCQB, symbol CYDVF, and on Frankfurt, symbol C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Jordan Bateman. Jordan, the Federal Court of Appeal ruled 3-0 that appropriate consultation with Aboriginal communities was done from the Trans Mountain Pipeline, and that means it should be a green light all the way now. What's your comment on that?
Well, it's exciting news, and it's another huge court victory for the Trans Mountain Pipeline, which has won far more cases than it's lost. Since the environmental groups and very select First Nations have started trying to go after it in court. Generally, Trans Mountain's process has been upheld. It's very interesting, and there'll be a lot more legal scholarship done on this in the days, weeks, and months to come, probably years to come, on this decision, because the court now is starting to say, look, okay, yes, government has a duty to consult, but on the flip side, First Nations have a duty not to be obstinate or outrageous in their demands. And, you're starting to see judicial law now kind of move towards this idea of a partnership between First Nations and government. And trying to, say, look, you can't just object to something for the sake of objecting to it. And then you can't use, well, we weren't consulted because you were, covering your ears and not wanting to talk about it. So we've seen a real shift in how judges view this. I think it's a good shift. I think it's a fair one based on, the process Trans Mountain and other projects like Canada, LNG Canada have gone through. Now it'll be interesting to see in coming years as, the BC government, claims it wants to entrench UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, into law as well. It'll be interesting to see how that layer coexist with this one, but the bottom line here is big win for Trans Mountain, big win for people who want to build this pipeline, big win for the Canadian economy, and I think a big win for clarifying precisely what role the First Nations have when looking at projects like this.
We see 5 hereditary chiefs opposed to the natural gas pipeline in northern BC. They said they weren't consulted, but they've also refused to meet with the company that's building the pipeline. The elected band councils unanimously approved this construction. And when they say the hereditary chief should be listened to and obeyed, well, that's like saying the Queen, who's a hereditary chief, should overrule Parliament in Great Britain.
Yeah, well, this is a discussion that the Wet'suwet'en have to have within their own circle. How do they want to be governed? And the truth is that there was also a referendum done among the Wet'suwet'en people that supported LNG Canada and the Coastal GasLink pipeline. So, the elected council ticked all their boxes, did what they had to do. There are hundreds of examples of LNG Canada and Coastal GasLink reaching out to the Wet'suwet'en people, consulting them, talking with them, writing them, inviting them to meetings, going to meetings with them. The Unistoten, these 5 hereditary chiefs, there's some shroud of controversy around them, even within the Wet'suwet'en Nation, as far as, are 2 of the 5 actually legitimate hereditary chiefs because they threw out two women who supported the Coastal GasLink project. So there's a lot to digest there. The interesting thing is, for those of us who've done a lot of work in public policy and we're very much aware of these elected councils and, been dealing with them on various issues over the years, I had really no idea, for example, that hereditary chiefs could still wield power. In fact, here in Langley, when I was on Langley Township Council, we did a lot of work with the Kwantlen First Nation and with their elected council there, and speaking with their chief. And then I just presumed the governance structure was, the chief was kind of like the mayor and oversaw this council of elders who were elected. But it turns out, the chief of the Kwantlen First Nation is a hereditary chief. And, that's an interesting wrinkle to all this that I'm not sure many people, really thought about. Not sure a lot of folks, a lot of everyday folks would have known. And it does sort of color, like, who does speak on behalf of these First Nations. You want to think that it's an elected person who's got the support of her people, but that's not always the case.
We'll have more with Jordan Bateman right after this.
Bateman Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Bateman's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at batemanresources.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Jordan Bateman. Jordan, the Construction Association has a court case of their own. Can you explain what's going on there?
Yeah, well, 18 months ago, ICBA, along with the BC Construction Association, the Vancouver Regional Construction Association, Progressive Contractors Association, two unions, CLAC and the Canada West Construction Union, several companies and several workers, took the government to court, the BC government to court, saying that this idea of handing over 3 transportation project contracts to only unionized workers who, only unions that happen to give the NDP money in previous elections, was unfair and should be thrown out. So 18 months ago we filed that. The government dragged the puck, tried to slow it down as much as possible so we could get these projects out the door. Finally, yesterday, we were supposed to have our day in court. That's Monday, February 3rd. We were excited, got to court, ready to argue against this. And the government had one last trick up its sleeve and said, no, Judge, you should really send this to the Labor Relations Board. Now, the problem with that is the Labor Relations Board is appointed by the NDP government. Further, the Labor Relations Board really doesn't have the ability to comment on ministerial decisions. In court, the BC government admitted that the minister, Claire Trevena, the transportation minister in this case, didn't even bother to consider a worker's charter rights when bringing this policy in. So essentially, the judge, we believe, made an error. He kicked it back to the Labor Relations Board, which will again further delay this. And we have two choices. We can go argue that the minister doesn't have the jurisdiction in front of a Labor Relations Board, which doesn't have the jurisdiction to decide whether she has jurisdiction, or we can appeal. And just this morning, we firmed up plans to file an appeal within a couple of weeks and get the Court of Appeal to look at this judge's goofy decision and overturn it.
And is this a realistic expectation from the Court of Appeal? Because they are very learned judges, and sometimes in the BC Supreme Court, you end up in front of a judge who has absolutely no expertise whatsoever in the particular case they're hearing.
Yeah, you're exactly right. We're hopeful. Look, the last thing the government wants to do is have to argue the merits of this case in court. They will do anything they can to avoid it because on the merits, they know that they're going to lose. So we get all these little hiccups and wrinkles and delay tactics. And now, they would love nothing more than for it to go to the LRB and have their, union buddies and other flunkies that they've appointed there kick this thing out. But we believe that when the Court of Appeal actually takes a look at this and says, no, they're not, this isn't about the merits at that point. This is about, whether or not the LRB can have jurisdiction over a ministerial decision. We think that will end up allowing us to go back to BC Supreme Court and arguing. So the merits of the case have yet to be discussed in court. I've yet to see time in front of a judge, even though it's been, again, 18 months since we filed. But we're hopeful that we can, look, the thing government would love for us to do, David Eby and John Horgan and Claire Trevena, is for us just to go away, get so fed up with it, not want to spend any more money and just disappear, quietly go into the night. But we're not going to do that. The coalition is strong. We're going to fight this to the very end because we know on the merits of the case, we're going to win. So we've just got to get in front of the judge who's willing to hear the merits.
Jordan, one of the things I was shocked to hear is how people would have to give up their seniority in their current union, say they'd been working for a particular company in that union for 30 years, and start from ground zero in one of these selected unions they'd be forced to join. Could you maybe explain that and how that would be a violation of their charter rights?
Well, you're exactly right. And, people want to paint this as, they're anti-union, these NDPs, they just want to give good union jobs to people and blah, blah, blah. The truth is, there's a whole swath of unions who are left out of this process, including locals of the Teamsters who, have to lose their seniority in order to go and work on these projects. So very embarrassing for the government when you actually start to dig into this. But yeah, so what would happen is, let's say Jordan Inc. is a road builder. I bid on a project. I win the project. I immediately have to fire my workers, terminate my workers, terminate their pensions, terminate their benefits, terminate them as employees, send them to a crown corporation, kind of an ICBC-like corporation set up by this government. They apply there. They end up, getting their job there and getting paid according to a union wage scale. And then the hiring hall for these unions assign workers to my project. So I may have sent them 50 workers to the Crown Corp. I may get 10 of my own workers back, and 40 union folks who've never worked in our company's safety system, have no idea what we do, how we operate, what our training system is, any of that. So it's really unfair. Further, there are workers, like the beauty of the open shop is, if you have a star on your roster, if you've got the Wayne Gretzky of masons, you can pay them a lot more than union scale because they're that valuable to your company. You need to keep them. You don't get that in the union. It doesn't matter how good you are at your job. It's how long you've been doing the job. That's how you determine what you get. And so that guy ends up making a lot less money, ends up not being eligible for, a share of company profits or whatever other kind of deal you have with them in order to keep them. It's bad for workers. So, it's an outdated model. We're at a time where 85% of workers are not involved with these 19 building trades unions. We're at a time where 82% of apprentices are not being trained by that. They're being trained by our kind of companies. And you've got a government who's basically, bald-faced lying to the public saying, no, this is going to be great for apprentices, it's going to be great for workers, when in fact it's anything but.
Jordan, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thanks for having me.
My guest has been Jordan Bateman, Vice President of Communications and Marketing for the Independent Contractors and Business Association in BC. His website, icba.ca. If you have any questions for Jordan or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@housestreet.com, our YouTube channel, Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter at Talk Digital Net. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of House Street Media Incorporated.